What stranger will you never forget? When I was in elementary school I fell through ice. A man who was walking his dog saw me fall and rushed to the shore. I frantically swam back to the shore. I was only about 5 meters into the pond, so it wasn't a long way, but it took some with soaked winter clothes. When I reached the shore, the man pulled me up by my jacket. It would have been difficult to get up, as there was a steep incline. I didn't thank him, because I was in shock, but I bet he knows I was grateful, and 20 years later I still hope I would have thanked him. I was doing tech support and my customer was so happy with my service she offered to marry me to her daughter. I politely declined. I was waiting for my appointment with an optometrist when an old Haitian man walked in with a grocery bags. Our receptionist knew him, so he walked up to me and proceeded to ask me riddles. When I finally got the answer to one he reached into his bag and gave me a Snickers then left. To this day I'm really curious as to what would motivate a man to become a wholesome riddler. The gentleman in a business suit handing me his umbrella in the middle of a downpour. We just were passing each other on the sidewalk, our eyes met, and he just handed over the umbrella with a "here ya go." Never saw him ago. The foreign exchange student and his parents who walked past my park bench on campus and dropped his passport. I chased after them to return it, and his mom started screaming at me in broken English like, "Why you have his papers? Why you steal his papers?" While the kid and his father looked like they were going to die from embarrassment. An Irish guy, not in Ireland, who spoke with such a strong accent that I couldn't make out a single word. To this day I question whether it was just a prank. I was on a tram and I didn't have a ticket and the ticket inspectors came on. I got asked to have my ticket seen and I said I couldn't find it on me and he said he'll come back so I can look for it. There was a stranger sat on the seat behind me who had a ticket. He gave it to me and he got off at the next stop. Guy gave me his ticket so I wouldn't be issued a fine. I was at a pool bar at a resort in Jamaica. A British lady next to me asked me the most random question, which turned into a nearly 3-hour conversation. The question, "What is a redneck?" It was a lot more difficult to explain than I thought it would be. I didn't realize that was an unknown concept to a lot of Brits. I was driving down south with my girlfriend. We have a blowout, so I put on the donut. The donut blows out while we are exiting the very next exit. So there we are, maybe 19 and at least 100 miles from anyone we know at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. I'm thinking on what to do next and probably looked like there was something wrong. So this older man offered to help. He drives me 20 or so minutes to a junkyard to get a cheap tire. Then he puts the tires on the rim with no more than a pry bar and some soapy water. Had a compressor on his truck, so he aired it up and I put it on. And we went on our way. The lady who told me I looked great in blue and that it was clearly my color. To this day, if I'm deciding between shirts to buy or wear, I'll go with blue. That compliment was about 15 years ago at least. I was drunk on my front porch one night. Me and a couple of friends were shooting the shit. I lived in a rough neighborhood at the time. Lot of homeless people, but most of them were decent people just down on their luck. Anyway, I see a homeless guy walking by my house and I holler out to him, "Yo man, you want a beer?" And he's like, "Man, hell yeah, thank you." So he comes up into the yard. I give him a beer and an extra one for the road. He starts going on about how he misses his son and how he never gets to see him anymore. We all sit and listen to him. He starts crying and says he bought his kid a bag of brand new Hanes socks and his mom wouldn't let him have them. Now I don't know what he did to deserve such treatment. Maybe he's a total son of a bitch and deserves to be where he is. Maybe not. I have no idea. But what I do know is, whatever his past, he was having a very human moment at the time, and he was super thankful, not just for the beer, but that me and my friends were listening and talking with him. Just letting him vent. Then he tries to give me the pack of socks he bought for his kid, which I vehemently refused. I was like, "Man, you keep them. Your feet might get cold out there." But he wasn't hearing it. I mean, he refused to keep them. He flat out insisted that I take them. Eventually it became obvious he wasn't gonna take no for an answer and he wore me down, and I accepted them. I guess he didn't need the reminder. He moved on and the party vibe was completely gone. We all just went inside and crashed. When I was super overweight, I was just starting to work out somewhat regularly. Being morbidly obese at the gym is terrible. I have never felt more eyes on me before in my life. I was on a treadmill, grinding out some inclined walk like jogging, and a super fit girl got on the machine next to me. This was all pre-covered. She did a short warm up, and before she got off the treadmill she turned to me and gave me a high five and told me to keep it up. It was so encouraging to have that support when I was used to getting stared at by everyone else in the gym. Her small kind gesture went a long way. When I was younger, I went grocery shopping with my dad. As we were walking, an old man stopped us and handed both me and my sister a shiny $1 coin. He told us that he wanted us to have them and to have a Merry Christmas. I never saw him again, but I think of that kind old man from time to time. There are a few. The biggest one was when I was homeless and asked a lady for the time. She told me and asked if I wanted to share her sandwich and the paper. She was the first person to treat me like a person, like I was worth something in years. I never got her name, but I will remember her fondly for the rest of my life. I know that she'll never ever know what a difference she made in my life. Just that one simple thing she did, and the humanity she showed me changed my life. I got sober just a few days later and completely turned my life around. One person, one smile, one kindness that you may never think of again in your life can change someone else's life beyond measure. I volunteer at a suicide hotline. Some guy, Bob, called in and we started talking about his home situation. Nothing absolutely horrendous. But he felt trapped and stressed and felt like he didn't have options. When people use language like that, our training says we should ask if they are thinking of suicide. Many volunteers have trouble with this. But if you mention suicide to someone who is not suicidal, it doesn't make them more suicidal. They just correct you and say no. I feel more like this. So I asked Bob, you're using a lot of language that people use when they're thinking of suicide. Are you thinking of suicide? There was a pause. And then a huge wail. I could hear so much pain in his voice. I listened to him cry for at least 5 minutes. I've talked to people who had suicidal ideation before. It would be better if I were dead kind of thinking, but with no plan. Bob said yes, he was considering suicide and we talked it out a bit more. After the pause and wail, that was the most concerned I've ever been for a human being outside my family. This wasn't just talking. I felt like he had already made up his mind about it, which was so scary. I only know what he told me. I know he was in his car parked somewhere. I know we got a few short laughs out of each other and we made some plans for him. Plans are important because it gives you a sense that if he has something to do, to plan for, he can't commit suicide. Anyway, he truly is a stranger. I don't know his real name or what he looks like. I just know his story, and I know that he was in immense pain that day. He had a particular kind of accent, and whenever I meet someone with that same accent, I think of him and hope he's okay. My lost wallet was returned in the mail. The anonymous stranger sent it back at their own expense. $9.75 postage, with all the money, credit cards, driver's license, and other items intact. Nothing was missing. A note enclosed read, "Please do something kind for a stranger whenever you have the opportunity." I once found a woman's wallet that had already had the money stolen, but still had her ID and bank card, so I dropped it off at her bank for her. They took my phone number and she texted me several times over the next month thanking me for saving her the trouble of replacing her ID. A few years later I found a guy's wallet with around $400 in it outside a 7-Eleven in the pouring rain in the middle of the night. Took it home, laid out all his cards and money on the table so they would dry, and returned it to his bank the next day. The bank manager came out of his office to thank me for returning the wallet and money, said they almost never get them back with the cash still there. They took my number and the dude never even texted or called to say thank you. I'd still return the cash if it happened again, and I know you shouldn't expect a thank you for doing the right thing, but holy hell does it still rankle me a bit to this day. Maybe it's just the contrast between no thank you at all and the bank manager and the other woman so happy just to get her ID back, or that I took the time so his wallet and ID wasn't ruined, but mine and that guy's wallet would probably have been gone and pilfered 2 seconds after if I hadn't found it. One of those things where you know it really shouldn't bother you but it still does. In college, I was dating a girl. I really loved her, but I realized that we were incompatible and we had to break up. So I downed a handle of vodka by myself in my dorm. I was drunk as fuck, but still feeling shitty, so I decided to head to the bars and drink some more. I actually don't remember if I made it there or not, but I remember getting off the bus from having come from the bars and was too wasted to continue the relatively short walk to my dorm. I decided to just lay down where I was at, which was quite literally the gutter next to the railing. Luckily it was an empty gutter, but a gutter nonetheless. This complete bro dude comes by and sees me laying in the gutter and helps me up. He helps me walk back to my dorm, and on the struggle there he asks me what's wrong. I explained the situation. I don't remember much of anything from the conversation, but I do remember him saying something to the effect of, "Bro, your problems aren't gonna be solved at the bottom of a bottle." Took a train to New York City by myself for the first time. I was 18. Second time to New York City. First time ever on a train. I told the kiosk lady that I'd never been on a train before and asked if she might give me a quick rundown of what to do. Another train station employee was nearby and was so interested and amused that I was taking a train for the first time and was alone. He walked me through what to do, down to the smallest detail. No judgment, no meanness. He was just a guy with a silly disposition, delighting in a young person's naivety, breaking up the doldrums of his week. I aspire to be that way when people ask me for help. Thanks, Frank P. You were a peach. When I was a broke-ass 18-year-old trying to make ends meet, I had a side hustle providing it support for households, like a Geek Squad sort of thing. In practice, I would mostly set up computers for elderly people and the tech illiterate and teach them how to use them, or get them out of technical binds, usually with printers, by googling on their behalf. This elderly Korean gentleman hired me to set up his new computer for him. I spent an hour setting it up and teaching him how to use it, and 2 more hours eating a wonderful lunch with the man and his wife. He wouldn't accept my invoice for just the first hour. Instead, he paid me 3x my hourly rate for all 3 hours and asked me to come back to train him the next week. Over the course of about a month I came back 4 times, worked with him, had a lovely meal, and he would tell me about his family and his kids. He was so proud of his daughter, who was about to finish her residency and become a pediatrician. By the end of the month he was pretty comfortable on the PC, and I thanked him profusely for how kind he was and how ridiculously he'd overpaid me. He told me I reminded him of his son, who was estranged for some reason I didn't press, and that he hoped somewhere out there somebody was being kind to his son and sharing a home-cooked meal with him. I don't know why, but more than 10 years later I can't think of that guy without tearing up. I hope everything turned out well for him. I was fiddling with my camera on a train platform in Melbourne, Australia, trying to take an artsy shot of the trains or something. I noticed through my viewfinder a guy about my age, early 20s or so at the time, full on flipping me off on the train on the opposite platform. I lowered my camera, laughing, and flipped him off back. He laughed. The train started to pull away, and I waved, and he waved back. Australia. I was in the university library with a really bad cold, super tired and wanting to go home but desperately studying for my upcoming exams really late at night. I thought I was alone, but a stranger came by my desk with an unopened pack of strepsils. He then told me my health was the most important thing I would have on this earth, and walked away before I could process what had just happened. I wanted to thank him for his kindness, but I never saw him again. I went on an absolutely wild ride for my 21st birthday. I was totally blasted by the end of the night with barely an understanding of what my name was, much less how old I was. Anyways, on our way home, me and my big group of friends rented a limo for the night. No drunk driving here. I had to take a piss, but it was late and nowhere was open. So the driver stopped in a mall parking lot and I just relieved myself in by a light post. It wasn't until the next morning that I realized I couldn't find my phone. I had no idea what happened to it, but my girlfriend got a call later that day from my number. Turns out one of the street cleaner / maintenance guys for the mall had found my phone, and it was his daughter calling to say they had found it, as her father didn't speak English. I explained the situation and offered to come pick it up, but she said it was fine and they would mail it. A few days later I received my phone in the mail with a happy birthday card. They could have just kept the phone and sold it, or he could have just turned it in somewhere like a homeless shelter or the mall's lost and found at the security office, but he didn't. He and his daughter took the time out of their day to go to the store, get a birthday card, pack it and my phone in an envelope, run out to the post office, and mail it to me. It's an act of kindness I'll never forget, especially considering I had just pissed all over the street he had to clean. My dad is a truck driver. At the time he was probably about 55 to 56. It was a long time ago, I can't remember, and we were waiting for a train to pass, so there was then this black guy that looked rather homeless, and he knocked on the glass of our truck and he said something along the lines of, "Can I give you something for your grandson?" and pulls out this model freight train. My dad insisted on giving him $20, but the guy refused, saying, "I'm just trying to make people happy." I was by myself in a restaurant bathroom with my screaming newborn baby. As his cries intensified, I started to crumble, knowing that we somehow had to walk all the way through the massive restaurant as the bathroom was tucked away in the back. A woman close to my age walked in. I apologized for the crying, and she immediately smiled and responded with, "Don't even worry about it." On her way out, she walked up to me and my baby and asked if this was my first. I responded with yes. She was not a mom herself, but immediately became empathetic to my situation. After a few minutes of conversation, I told her that I was nervous about walking my crying baby through the busy restaurant. She looked at me and said, "Let's get you out of here." She then opened the door and walked behind me, softly rooting me on all the way back to my table. She had no idea how much I needed her in that moment, and I'm forever grateful. When my wife and I first started dating, we were walking into a Trader Joe's holding hands. This elderly woman looks at us and says rather loudly, "Cute couple alert." My wife and I still laugh about it. It's been 12 years at least. My son was a week old and had to go to the doctor. I had severe early onset postpartum depression, and I hadn't slept more than an hour at a time since his birth. I locked my keys, phone, and son in the car. This incredibly wonderful older couple calmed me down, called CAA, parked beside my car, and sat with me until the tow truck came and unlocked the car. The tow driver refused payment. I will never forget those three people. I was walking on the street and a person came to me and said if I had any money. I gave him some. He looked at the money, told me it was sinful, and returned it to me. It was really weird. The money was my hard-earned money. Was on a solo trip to Amsterdam last year, partying it up as one does. Was at a bar having a few drinks, and a gorgeous British woman a seat or two over from me, mid-20s, grabs my arm. I'm a very gay-looking man, by the way, and starts going on about how good it is to see me. I got the hint and noticed an older guy bothering her and her friend. Played along with them as their long-lost BFF until he left. We ended up spending the rest of the night bar crawling and getting trashed together, having the best time. I'll never forget you, B. Few years ago, I was stopping at a red light and there was an old man selling candy. He approached my car, and I was ready to tell him I didn't want anything, but he motioned me to roll my window down, gave me a lollipop and some gum, and said to the beautiful young lady, "Never forget you're a star," and walked away before I could say anything. Needless to say, he brightened my day. Now, whenever I'm sad, I think about that man telling me I'm a star. Never fails to cheer me up. Cast me back about 9 years ago. I had got my first vehicle and got my license. First day on the road, I decided to impress this girl I was talking to and picked her up to go to the mall. We had a great time, and as we were going to leave, she starts messing with my nether bits as I'm pulling out of the mall. I'm distracted and turn without even looking. Blam. T-boned. My truck was relatively undamaged, but the guy's car was absolutely fucked up. I start panicking. I hop out, and I'm a big dude. I've always been large, 6 feet 03, 200 plus. And this guy's big like built. And I'm like, oh fuck me, he is gonna beat my ass. I ask him if he is alright. "Yeah man, we good, you're good." I nod and ask, "What do we do?" "We call the police, that's all." And in my head that means I'm going to jail or something. So I freak out, have a breakdown and start crying. I'm a kid that feels way in over my head. I'm sobbing telling him I'm sorry I wasn't paying attention, and I'm rattling on and on and on. Out of nowhere this man just grabs me in a huge hug. Like embraced me. Put his hand on the back of my head and said, "Bro, it's all good. Calm down. It's just a car. We pay out the ass for insurance for a reason. It's just an item, everyone gonna walk away fine. Homie, is all good, take a breath." And the dude just kinda held me for a minute. No anger, no rage. The police came, took statements. No tickets. He got his car towed and his girlfriend came and picked him up. Right before he got in her car he looked back and said, "Pay attention, people die every day for carelessness. I'm glad to see you're alright now." And I will never ever forget that man. I made sure to bring his mentality into my future life. I've got into a couple fender benders here and they're not at fault. And whenever someone starts freaking out, it's just an item. Thank you for not killing me that day. A little old Jamaican man came in to work and gave me a rosary. He doesn't know me, but he told me he thought I could do with his prayers. I'm agnostic, but I put that rosary on my name badge, and when times are hard and customers are abusive I play with it. It doesn't remind me that God is watching over me, but it does remind me that there is some good left in humanity. A man at Walmart around the holidays a few years ago paid our bill of over $200. It was at a time where we were struggling to make ends meet, so the timing could not have been any better. When I was at a bus stop once about 4 or 5 years ago, a nervous looking man asked me what time his bus came and informed me he was going for an interview. I told him the time, wished him luck, and then my bus came, and I never saw him again. The reason he stuck out to me was because he reminded me of that part in Roald Dahl's The Twits, where he said that even if a person is ugly, if they think happy thoughts, the happiness shines out of their face and they will always look lovely. This man was extremely ruddy, had a large mustache and very large teeth, but he was so polite that his positivity shone out of him. The woman who pulled over in the pouring rain and talked me down off the railing of a bridge over a Florida highway when I was 18. She looked like she had just left a business meeting, but she stayed with me for probably an hour. No umbrella, no raincoat, car still running, listening to me, offering words of encouragement. She truly believed that God had a plan for my life, and it wasn't supposed to end that night. She finally convinced me that suicide was a permanent solution to a temporary problem. I'm 51 now. I still haven't figured out what God's plan is for me, but I'm starting to believe she was right. My mom, dad and I were driving through Arches National Park and were at the visitor center waiting for my dad to come out on a really hot day. This guy kind of walked up towards the back of our van kind of shifty, like he wanted to ask us something, but was too afraid to. After about 3 times of him walking up but then turning around, he finally came up to the window and with a thick Russian accent wondered if we could give him a lift up to the top of the park per se. He explained that him and 2 other guys with him were Russian students that were traveling around the US over the summer and got permission to camp but didn't have a car since they were taking buses everywhere. My mom told him to wait for my dad and ask him, since he was the driver and might not be too happy to see we picked up some extra bodies. Dad was cool with it, and we got them and their packs in our van, which was packed already since we were doing a West Coast road trip after I graduated high school. One of the guys sat on the floor and was happy they didn't have to walk several miles in the heat and elevation changes. So as we are driving through the park, these guys are just as chatty as can be, and I've never really interacted with anyone from another country on such an intimate level, so I had a zillion questions. It turns out all these guys are PhDs that were taking the trip together. Super friendly guys and extremely grateful for the lift. They tried paying my dad, who refused, which in turn turned into a typical Minnesota nice exchange of one party insisting on paying and the other flat out refusing to take payment. Since it was a hot day, we told them to reach into the loaded cooler and take whatever they wanted. One of the guys said they would just share a 20-ounce bottle of pop, and we of course weren't going to let that happen and made them take 2 cold drinks apiece. We got to the top, dropped them off, said our goodbyes and continued onward. I'll never forget those guys. I was in the laundry with my dog and an old man with his dog approached. Our pets met, and the man said, "When Jesus said love your neighbor as you love yourself." Only the dogs understood it. After that we had a small chat, then he left, and I have never seen him again. I will never forget that man. A prisoner on a Greyhound bus. There were two of them, but I remember one specifically. Apparently, they send prisoners who are transferring from maximum to minimum security on Greyhound buses. They didn't have a guard or anything, and from what she said, they had no motivation at all to run. She had already served 5 years, and only had 6 months left. If she tried to run, she would serve at least 10 more years. I was 17 and pregnant, and completely broke. I was starving and scared. My life was in shambles, and everyone in my family had abandoned me. She bought me food, and was kind to me. She was old enough to be my mother, and I really wished she was. She didn't judge me, she just bought me food and drinks, and offered kind words. I really wish I could find her, and repay her kindness. A translator I met in Iraq. He had worked with the Red Cross through the Balkan Wars of the 90s, and had been taken prisoner half a dozen times. The last time, he was beaten so badly that the nerve damage cost him the use of his right arm. It was 90% immobile. After 10 years without the use of his right arm, a surgeon offered to operate on him, with the understanding that if he failed, they would just amputate. So he went under the knife not knowing if he would wake up with a working arm or a stump. After 5 years of physical therapy, learning how to use his arm again, he signed up to work as a translator in the war in Iraq because he saw how many innocent Iraqis were being killed by American forces due to the communications barrier. When I met him, he had been there for 3 years, while his wife and 2 kids were in America. I always try to be a good person, but I know I'll never be as good as that. Went on a 3-day trip to Berlin, and saw 2 women having a heated argument. It ended with one of them doing a cartwheel and throwing up her middle fingers, then running away. Be sure to like and subscribe for more reading Reddit videos. Thanks, bye.